Okay, welcome everyone to our second in a two-part series covering recruiting, retaining, and advancing within STEM fields for women. We welcome Pam McGee for her second presentation to this group. She's the Associate Professor at the Minnesota State University, and we're just so excited to have her again discussing these important topics. Today's presentation is Connect with Confidence, Retain and Advance Women in the STEM Field. Pam's going to do her presentation, and then we'll have a period for question and answer. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, you can type them into the chat box, and I will receive them and prepare them for the question and answer period towards the end of the session. If you have any troubles with any of the audio or anything like that, just send me a quick note through chat and we'll be all set. So thanks so much for joining us, and I'm going to turn it over to Pam.
Good morning. Thank you, Lindsay, for kicking us off and getting us started this morning. It has been fun actually thinking about this again for you, and it's also been an interesting start because when I continued to prepare the materials for today, you're going to see some connections to last time's material, and you should, because recruiting students and recruiting more females to work in STEM is directly connected to the environment that you're recruiting them into. And the environment that you're recruiting them into is based on, some of the retention and promotion strategies you have. What's different about this session, and what's glaringly different, is there's I won't start with what's different. What's the connection point from these sections are things like, creating a work environment that's friendly to females. We heard about that as being important in recruiting people as well. The second thing that's kind of a connection is that there's a female confidence issue sometimes that waxes and wanes throughout a female's career, not necessarily just in STEM, but accentuated in STEM because of some of the other surrounding factors. Another connecting point between the two sessions is it takes a couple of both genders, all genders actually, to solve the issues, if you will. What is glaringly different and what is glaringly important in promoting and retaining females in STEM is the amount of engagement required by the males that work in that environment, because actually they are the ones that have the loudest presence, just sheer percentages, and actually it's that audience that is going to require probably the most change in behavior and probably the most ownership and accountability. So we'll learn about that in this session. Secondly, what's most glaringly obvious in promoting and retaining women is females have to step up. I mean, we have to figure out how to close the gap between male and female confidence levels, because it's like running a great race to get to the end, and your confidence level, which is proven throughout history, often propels you faster than other things. And what is not happening is that women are not running as fast in the confidence lane as our male counterparts. So it's somewhat of a joint issue, but those are really the two glaring things that'll happen. Today we're going to talk about some root causes. We're going to talk about some benchmark universities. There's 6 of the 10 that I'll talk about that have been ranked as one of the most female-friendly STEM organizations across the nation. And then we end, like we did last time, just talking about a melting pot of ideas for you to pick from as you continue to work on this initiative at Ivy Tech. I'm impressed with Ivy Tech because you are, I believe, going to be at the cutting edge. If you take even a handful of these initiatives, you're going to be at the cutting edge above your competitors out in the educational market. And I don't say competitors loosely because I know education is not a business, but it amazes me when I look around and poke around into other educational facilities and I poke around in my research at really such low-hanging fruit we all have if we want to make a difference in this, percentage of women in STEM. When we think about why that's important, there's really a couple of things I want to start with before we jump into the root causes. It's important for us to pay attention to this issue of no or few women in STEM, just because of a shrinking workforce in some respects, shrinking professional workforce. It's also important for us to pay attention to this, just because there's a national movement going on right now that's been stronger than the last couple of decades on female initiatives, female equality, and thirdly, it is. I don't want to say it's been proven, but there's a connection between having a diverse team in getting the best results. And so why wouldn't you want diversity on your team? Diversity of color, diversity of thought, diversity of general preference, and or sexual preference, and diversity of of gender. You want that diversity because you're representing a diverse set of customers. So the example I use is the auto industry. Well, we all know that the majority of the auto buying purchase decisions rest with females. So if you want to really gravitate towards that audience, you should have female engineers designing the cars, because there may or may not be a difference, and you should have those in equal, I don't want to say 50-50 because the world doesn't operate that, but in more numbers that we have. And so, for a number of reasons, which, if we were to open it up for open mic right now, there would be a number of, additional reasons that we all have for doing this. Before we get to root causes, I just want to remind you of the perspective that we started with last time. This is a macro issue. It is just accentuated in the STEM fields because of some of the extenuating history and circumstances that continue to reside there. It takes time and dedicated resources. I work with a number of educational institutions across the nation, and I often, in my initial meeting with them to come in and help them with some of their analysis and moving this initiative forward, I often get told, well, we aren't going to have any more money and we aren't going to have any more time. And at that point, I always pause, as I said last time, because this is going to take some time and dedicated resources. So don't fool yourself and think that, on the ends of the continuum, that you can do this and not add in any more time or resources. On the other hand, don't think that you have to add a staff of 10 and a $500,000 budget. It takes both genders, it takes all roles, and it takes a willingness to have difficult conversations. And it takes the courage to shift paradigms and beliefs, because this is about switching some deep-seated beliefs. And, history is a very powerful connector for us. Retention and promotion of women in STEM, I just use these two facts. And as I said last time, you can pull out just about any fact from different sources, and so you'll have something that may be more or less in your archive of knowledge. But after 12 years, which is still startling to me, is that 50% of the women who originally worked in STEM have left, and they leave within the first 5 years. Where that is only, compared to other professions, only 20% of women leave after 5 years. So what is going on in that 30%? Why are women in STEM leaving faster than women in other professional fields? I mean, you got to believe some of that 20% is, of course, they make a conscious decision. I want to go home, I want to raise my kids, and I don't want to work. Maybe some of them get sick, maybe, et cetera, et cetera. But not all 50% of that can account for women not wanting to work long and hard hours and wanting to raise their children. We're being a little bit naive if we somewhat couch that in excuses, which we'll hear about a little bit later. The second thing is that the most important driver of female exits from engineering, and I know that engineering doesn't represent the entire STEM field, and I know that certain STEM fields like biology and computer science have elevated the pay of women in those fields, but in general, dissatisfaction over pay and promotion accounts for about 60% of the gender differential in why women leave. I've included the links to those sources there if you want to go out. They aren't academic journals and year-long studies, but they do make the point that this is an issue, and this is a glaring issue for all of us to pay attention to. root causes for retention and promotion issues for women in STEM fields. You know, I arrived at these 5 root causes from really doing 2 things. One of them is I just scanned as much literature as I possibly could, and I've done a meta-analysis with others with other women across the nation. A meta-analysis meaning that if women are, if we are having retention and promotion issues, what are the 5 things, 3 things, 2 things, 1 thing that keeps continually showing up in most of the, academic research? And the 5 root causes. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I've done is I have actually done applied research where I've met with over 300 women regionally and talked to them about this various issue, sometimes in focus groups, sometimes in individual interviews, and sometimes in just surveying their their impressions and their behaviors on this topic. Out of 30 some issues that that surfaced to the top, these 5 had the most connection across both of those levels of research. The first is engaging work environments, female self-confidence issues, no sense of belonging, lack of male engagement and accountability, and lots of talk and excuses but really no action and accountability. The rest of this presentation, we're going to take a look at each one of those categories and talk about maybe why they occur, and theorize on some of the things I've seen other educational institutions and industry businesses do to somewhat rectify and make some changes in those areas. Like I said, I'm sure if we opened it up for a conversation right now, you'd be able to say, yeah, what about labs? What about decreasing numbers in grade school? What about the issue of secondary, education? All of those are important. I'm not minimizing those. I'm just trying to make the point that these 5 came up louder and more consistently across the meta-analysis and then the primary research. So if you look at those 5 areas, I went out to look at some benchmark examples of different educational institutions that are, making some changes in this area. And Westminster was really a college that I was proud of. They actually just set a goal to hire more females, period. And they just set out to make those changes and to hold each other accountable for it. And if you go out to their website and you look around, which I'm going to click on their website now, you're going to get an impression of a female-friendly environment that you want to work in. And this is somewhat of a best practice. I've never been to Westminster College, but look at the undergraduate picture. There's a woman in charge at the whiteboard. There's 3 guys engaged. Look at the graduate program. There's another woman in charge with some people sitting around the table. Look at the open houses. And so you just get this feeling that they have really driven some success, and their numbers show it. They graduate a higher, percentage of women in STEM than they ever have. They have a higher percentage of female faculty members than they ever have, and so it's really kind of a collision of a lot of different things. But yet, something that they made a conscious effort to set out and hire more females. Carnegie Mellon University, amongst the many things that they did, one of their success stories is they were set to change the peer culture, to change the relationships between male and females on staff in how they were retained and how they were promoted. And they made some conscious effort in making sure that it was a respectable environment that everybody worked in. They made a conscious effort to make sure that the lab times for male and females, that females weren't the ones just cleaning the labs, and multiple little things that they can be proud of. Harvey Mudd set out to just create a more nurturing campus. We talked about Harvey Mudd in our last presentation, and they decided that they weren't just going to create a soft female culture, because I think that's wrong. You have to be, gender. You can't be gender, you can't take one gender over the other, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And they didn't say they wanted to just create a female, environment, nor a male environment. They focused on what can we do to create a more nurturing environment, so we engage all of our employees. We engage, you know, our young, our new career employees, our females, our males, our LBGT group, all of those. They wanted to make sure that they had an environment that was nurturing. Secondly, they went out to change the curriculum. They actually realized that by retaining and promoting women in STEM fields, they had to change up some of their curriculum. And we're going to talk about some examples of that later, but that's how they've been successful in retaining in higher numbers females, as well as promoting more females than other educational institutions. Two other examples is, Colby College. They actually had a long history of, you know, being a male-only college, and they were years ago one of the first colleges to let in females. And so the message that they send us is that be the first to do something unique for women in STEM. Be the first to market with something that causes some attention and maybe distinguishes yourself from, you know, all the other hundreds of educational institutions that are, you know, grabbing and striving and trying to make a difference in this field. Caltech also has had some success in this, and what I would consider probably their primary driver of success is they just set a goal. They were bold enough to say we're going to have an X percentage more of female women in our environment, and we're going to have a goal of this percentage of retention and this percentage of promotion. Now, I know there's a lot of debate and a lot of controversy and a lot of philosophical discussions to be had about, you know, setting those affirmative action type goals, or setting those goals that, you know, maybe favor, you know, one gender or one color over another. On the other hand, without setting a goal and striving for it, yet throughout the process understanding the difference and treating each other equitably based on the different experiences that people have had, you know, may be a forcing function to really make some change in this area. There were, you know, 5 other, you know, benchmark examples in this study on the top 10 colleges that are female friendly to STEM. You have those resources and you can look them up, or, you know, do as I do, poke around on their website, make some phone calls and gather some data. Benchmarking is, you know, sometimes good and sometimes not good, because we can always excuse it as, well, yes, if I was Caltech, I would have the money or the resources to do that. Or if, you know, we had a female president that, you know, mandated it from the top, I could do that. You know, learn what you can that fits within your culture, but don't hide behind your obstacles and your barriers. Be willing to challenge those. So we've talked about root causes and we've talked about benchmark examples. Let's jump into some action. When I was preparing for this session, you know, earlier over the summer with Joyce Wilkerson, we talked about, you know, let's make these action-driven. Let's make them steeped in good research, steeped in good benchmarking practices, but let's try to make them as applied as we possibly can. And let's talk about different applications, from, you know, really big things that you're going to have to work over the next 5 to 10 years to change, to low-hanging fruit that you can, you know, maybe implement in 1 week, 1 month, 1 quarter, 1 semester type thing. So if one of the root causes is creating an engaging female work environment, I want to talk about some of the ways that we can do it. Some of it is aesthetic, some of it is holistic, some of it is in your policies on how, you know, the expectations of, you know, your work environment, and some of it is just redesigning the interaction between males and females in your work environment. One of the most prominent comments that came out in the focus groups of women in STEM was about the subtle things that happen in the work environment that we just don't know how to handle. And the subtle things are like what happened to me this morning. I was in the office around 7 o'clock, and we have a new adjunct in our construction management department, and I've never met him before, and he was here busily getting ready for his class. He's a good guy, kind-hearted, and my colleague, who happens to be a male, walks into the lunchroom, And they have a nice conversation on, you know, what's going to happen in the day and the weather and so forth and so on. And I'm standing out there, you know, going through my mailbox. Then I walk in and he says, well, hello, how are you? And I turn to get myself a cup of coffee, and unfortunately, you probably can fill in the blanks. He said, hey, thanks. I'm so glad you're here to make us coffee. I didn't expect that this morning. How ironic. How ironic. And at that point in time, I struggle myself. What should have I done? Should have I come off as one of those pushy broads that said, coffee, hang on, I'm the highest ranking female in this department. I run the department. I actually signed off on your paperwork. I don't make you coffee. Well, you know, that's not really an appropriate answer. Or on the other side of the continuum, do I walk out and do nothing? Do I walk out and do nothing? And so somewhere in between is the right answer, and that's what we have to strive for. So I just somewhat paused, and I looked at him, and I kind of sized him up, and I said, I can understand why you may have made that mistake. The person who makes coffee, she and I have a similar persona. I'm actually the chair of the department, and making coffee is something that I probably haven't done for a number of years. And he just paused, and it was polite and respectful, but the point was made to be careful about those things. I want us to take a look at Carly Fioroni and some of the things that she has bumped into in what if we treated women in the office with these subtleties that we treat men, because this is all about creating a female-friendly workplace. So let's take a look at this.
How do you walk in those shoes?
Maybe we could restructure?
Here's an idea. How about we restructure?
Yes, great idea, Joanna. So how do you manage the work-life balance? You like to bake? How about you handle the cake for Gina's birthday? Is work less of a priority for you now? Does your wife help with the kids? Wow, are you going to eat all that yourself? Well, we shouldn't have too many men on the project. You know how that could be. I'm assuming you two can work together without getting catty.
And then I said, well, I didn't know that.
Look at you being funny. I didn't know men could be funny.
So, you know, as glaringly obvious and maybe as glaringly inappropriate as some of those comments are, I believe that most often or not they're made innocently. They aren't made to, you know, they aren't made to degrade. They're just based on some of the things that we've always done. And comments that came up in the research on subtle perceptions were like people saying, well, yeah, you know, I've got that one female in that, you know, operations management program, and, you know, she's pretty good. Yeah, I've got that one female, she's pretty good. You know, being defined by gender. And so being cognizant of those and staying between the ditches in how you approach them, from coming off as, you know, angry and aggressive, which just, you know, really puts people on the defensive and then they don't want to change, to ignoring and being passive where they don't even realize it's an issue so they can't change, trying to create an engaging female work environment and really pay attention to the perceptions. Secondly, expect, engage, and reward work-life balance. You know, this isn't anything new. It's just accentuated in the STEM fields. For some reason, we have some of the most grueling work expectations. And, you know, I'm not saying we have to lower our standards. I'm saying we have to catch up. Because lots of other industries and lots of other educational sectors have paid conscious attention to this to make sure that, you know, to make sure that balance is rewarding. This is particularly important if you want to engage different generations in the workplace. A couple of years ago, I did some generational studies as my research platform, and it became loud and clear that this next generation is not lazy. It became loud and clear, though, that this next generation of, men and women are not going to live to work. They're going to work to live. And they've seen their families, crumble because of, 90-hour work weeks. They've seen their dad be let go from a company after, 20 years of hard work because they were restructuring and downsizing. So this is not even going to be an option in the future. This is somewhat going to be an expectation. Thirdly, create visually appealing design and workspaces. This one I put on the slide, I take off the slide, I put on the slide, I take off the slide, because it's not as prevalent as the others, but yet it's important. There has been minimal research, and if any of you are looking for a research platform, this might be a fun one to start with in this field, is that women pay more attention to visually appealing design and workspaces than men. Now, that's not always true, and the minute I say that, I go, why did I say that? I offended somebody. On the other hand, just anecdotally, as well as some very preliminary premature research that at least I've bumped into, said that makes a difference.
If you have
Lastly, create part-time opportunities of value for women who want to raise and work a family. We started this back in the 80s when I was in industry, where we would have job share and work share and all of, the crazy things that, were coming out of a work-life balance, more females in the workforce. I think the thing that is different, there's two things about that. One, we were premature in some respects because there really wasn't a lot of success in it, because we didn't have the automation and the technology to make that happen. Two, we predominantly focused on entry-level, lower-level professional menial tasks, where there's a tremendous amount of professional women that want to take a pause, be home 3 days a week, and pay attention to their career, but yet not have promotional activities be impeded, not have, their career stopped and stalled. Why does a career have to be based on number of hours worked, as well as, whether or not you are full-time or part-time, et cetera, et cetera? Other ways to engage females in the work environment is to review policies for male-dominated behaviors. Some of the policies that may be in place are not female-friendly. And I cannot tell you in specifics what your policies are. I can only tell you what the policies are that we've bumped into at my own organizational institution. We used to have a policy on, appropriate leave of absences. And most of those leaves of absences ignored family and young children and aging parents that needed to be taken care of. It involved things like work industries, typically more male-dominated behaviors. So we go through, we're a union environment here, but we go through our policy reviews to make sure that, they A, are up to date and accurate, B, that they're within the union mandate, but C, we've taken it one step further in our department that they're gender friendly, and there isn't a weight on one or the other. A second thing is to create opportunities for collaboration. It is, been researched in many psychological fields, from, where, what women personalities show up at work, how a woman's work style is different than a man's work style, where women excel at emotional intelligence over men, and where men excel at emotional intelligence over women. One of the things that is a resounding behavioral trait of females, I don't know if it's nurture or nature, genetic or something that you learn because you're put in these categories at a very young age, but women like to collaborate more than men do. That doesn't mean that men don't like to collaborate. It just means that it's much more of a driving force for collaboration. I can speak personally to this in my own environment. I have a tendency to want to do research with teams more than individual research. I have a tendency to pull my team together more and solve and make decisions together than my male counterpart does. I have a tendency to look across campus for collaborative ideas more than my male counterpart does. And I've had, a couple of different male counterparts in this department, and it's just struck me as kind of ironic that that's been a consistent pattern in our area. So do you provide opportunities for collaboration? And collaboration isn't where one person has an idea and they delegate the activities. Collaboration is where you have an idea or a decision to make and you bring people around the table, you build consensus, you seek synergies, and you try to create an even higher level order decision than if you were to make this decision individually. Yes, it takes more time. It takes more time, but that is a natural desire and need for a female engaged work environment. Thirdly, put female case examples in the curriculum. One of the schools that I worked with out east has put in their chemistry labs some makeup labs where you kind of unpack different cosmetics and try to figure out what their makeup is and what their chemical, infrastructure is in there. You can tell I'm not a chemist. But what a female-friendly, example, a female-friendly case study. Another organization that I worked with in southern Wisconsin, they were thinking about, machining, and they were thinking about tooling, and they were thinking about processing. So they used the textile industry, which is one of the oldest industries, and they brought in some of these sewing machines, and they used sewing as an example for that case study in there. It was interesting when I was observing this environment to see how uncomfortable the males were with this situation. And at first I thought, oh, this isn't right, this isn't going to work. On the other hand, if females feel uncomfortable with all the male-dominated examples, how come that is any better than making a male feel comfortable in, these gender-assigned different cases? Someday I hope that we're androgynous in our examples where there isn't that, male, female, feminine, masculine, part, but, frankly, right now it's loud and clear. Just like it's loud and clear that I have a pink background. That would be perceived more feminine than a blue, bold male background for my PowerPoint presentation. Another way to create an engaging female work environment is to assign females to leadership roles, not administrative roles. I hesitate to bring that up because I yawn when I talk about it, because we've been hearing about this for years. But what is disheartening to me is we haven't done anything about it. We still have, you look around, and I observed 100 meetings over the course of 5 years, and those meetings were in male-dominated fields. And out of those 100 meetings, 72% of the time, females were the note takers. 72% of the time. So if we, want to think about the world differently, if we could just change that. And just the other day, I was in a forum in my College of Business and Industry, and it was myself and 4 other males, and we had to do a little brainstorm breakout session. And guess who they defaulted for to take notes? So just pause. What if Ivy Tech was going to say, we are going to just look at this in our department, and we are going to make sure there's 50% of male females taking notes. That in itself would create a much more engaging work environment. And not only because it's not going to probably change the world, but it's going to send a very, very strong message. The next is a forced show and tell item. Research will indicate in the confidence area, which we're going to get to next, that men will talk about their successes much more than women will. And that isn't because they're boisterous or egotistical or bragging. It's just because they feel if they have experience in that area, they're going to share it, somewhat as a way to say, hey, look, I know what I'm doing. You should assign me to this task. And they do that, more consistently and more frequently than females do. Females will often hold back on their accomplishments and assume that, when I got this job, about my accomplishments, so I don't really need to talk about them. Now, this isn't 100% of the time. Of course, females brag and talk about their accomplishments, and of course, males don't mention everything they do out loud, and can become this toot your horn, overblown example. On the other hand, it doesn't happen equally. So to make that more equally, what about a forced show and tell agenda item in your department meetings to make sure that males and females are recognized equally. We have it on our agenda. We have good stuff, bad stuff, ugly stuff, and then a little show and tell at the end where we're forced to go around and talk about something that, some qualification or something that we want to brag about, just about ourselves, not about our department, not about our students, not about our, whatever. And then lastly, I put this on, and this is something that I want to see some institution do, because so far in the STEM field, this has not been done, at least to my knowledge. Consciously target women with children as future employees. Make that a target, and then figure out with that new group of people how you're going to make a female-friendly, parent-friendly work environment. Because honestly, that is one of the number one underlying issues that we need to address. So target women with children. What if you went to this pool of 30-year-old women that have stepped out of the workforce, and you said to them, we're going to create an engaging female work environment. We know you have children. What can we do to make sure that you want to work with us, that we can promote you, and that you can raise your family? Instead of holding it as an or, we can either have a career and be successful in STEM, or raise our family. What if Ivy Tech was the organization that figured out the and? Where we could hold those two competing situations right now and create an environment for the rest of the world to follow. To me, that would be so super cool. The second thing that we have to do to retain and promote women is to take action on female confidence issues. The last summer I spent regionally doing research on, women confidence issues, and it's just resounding, the gap that we have. And the gap is there that women carry more self-doubt, women don't ask for promotions as much as men do, women don't ask for raises, women won't ask for a promotion unless they know they can do a certain percentage of the job, which is much higher than men who ask for a promotion, in what percentage of the job they think they can do. I mean, this is just, very, very broad. And so I believe it's starting in the grade schools right now and elevating some of these female confidence issues. I also believe this starts in the home. I also believe that it's going to take time. I also believe that women have to stand up and switch their paradigm. I am not going to hide behind my self-doubt anymore. I am going to take risks. I am going to speak up. Those things that Sheryl Sandberg discusses in Lean In. Kay and Shipman, wrote the confidence code, which is very empirical and very science-driven, but their underlying theme in here is confidence. And so I'm wondering if, and I haven't seen this done, but I'm wondering if in order to take action on female confidence issues, is what if you address it right up front with some behavioral, psychological, clinical workshops that really make an impact over the course of a year with the female. Now, I'm not advocating that one workshop once a year or one workshop over the course of the year is going to, close the gap entirely. But my hunch is it's going to raise awareness, and it's going to make incremental difference in how females respond to males in the work environment and vice versa. I don't think this should be required just for females. I think it should be required for males as well, so we have a common language. Resounding, we've heard about mentorship programs. Confidence improves with mentors, and right now we have this impression that we need female mentors for females, and yes, we do, because that means we have more females in leadership roles. But I think where we will also make improvements is having male to female mentorship roles that focus on confidence issues without saying to the female, if you want to be confident, you got to show up as a boy, or saying, well, I don't like it when you cry. So, there has to be a balance between that. Thirdly, how do we reward taking action with both genders in our work environment? The Confidence Code studied and scientifically has connected that how you build confidence is you take risks. You take a risk and you succeed, your confidence goes up. You take a risk and you succeed and your confidence goes up. You take a risk and you don't succeed, your confidence only goes down marginally, but it still goes up. And so what are we doing with our, everybody in our environment, but particularly females, in rewarding taking action and taking risks without punishment and without severe consequence, and then, buckling their ability to get tenure and promoted at the end. Lastly, take action on the female confidence issues, which was one of the top 5 root causes, is maybe just do a confidence code book club. We're doing a book club in our department right now, not on a female issue this semester, but we've done that in the past, but on how to build a purpose-driven environment, because we believe that Patrick Lencioni's work in the and research in his publication called The Advantage, if we create a purpose-driven department, that's going to create a female and male nurturing environment where people are engaged in their work, they're excited about their work. So, there's many different ways you can do that. I like what I bumped into when Carell said this in 2001, that I believe one of the most valuable contributions we can make is to instill a greater degree of self-confidence. So, one of the root causes is, female-friendly workplaces. The second is confidence. So these are things that females need to step up to the plate with, as well as have male involvement and endorsement. Thirdly, we need to create a sense of belonging. When we talked about Westminster, it appears to me that they have created a culture and an environment where women feel like they belong. They are, equally respected. They are perceived as important. They hold leadership positions. And women and men alone, this goes back to a theory you've heard about many, many times, have a need for, from Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we all have a need to belong. We have a need for physiological needs to be satisfied and safety needs, and then our second level of needing to belong and staying engaged, which engaged typically has a direct effect on retention, is we have to have a sense of belonging. And so how do you create that sense of belonging? Well, I do believe yet at this point in time we need women-only events, because we need to come together and figure out how to solve these issues, because there are specific gender-related issues. We also need to maybe create a female lens to programs. Look at this Greenways, the Pink to Green toolkit. Wow. We would not, that is really taking a female lens to say, hey, this is how you can feel like you belong in this field as a female, because often or not, as we talked about last time, we don't feel like we belong in this field. So even if we end up in the field because we have a deep down desire and are dang good at it and competent at it, once we get there, we look around and we go, well, gosh, I'm not going to stick around because I don't feel like I belong in this. Or I feel like I have to work in this male-dominated environment because I don't belong. Thirdly, offer female-friendly stuff that will help you have create a sense of belonging for females. On-site daycare, lactation rooms. One of the focus groups I did, and this is a fairly graphic description, said, I would like to know that as a mother, if I am going to nurse my child, that I have a place to go that is, conducive for that. Because last year I was nursing, pumping and getting ready, taking care of all that, and I was in a room next to, the other 8-10 males in my department, and I had, screens and all that, but the sound barrier wasn't as great. And so every time I was in there nursing, they could hear the pumping of the machine as they walked by. I didn't know about it. They felt uncomfortable talking to me about it, and finally they said something. Boy, that doesn't create a sense of belonging for a woman. Create a play area. I have one department on campus in the technical field that has done this, because if you need to stay late and you need to bring in your young children, there's a place that they can go. Coffee shops have done this for a number of years. Why can't STEM facilities? Embed social time into the workplace, that sense of collaboration, that sense of social. And then lastly, just set a goal to hire more women, so there's that sense of belonging. So if one of the root causes is that we recruit these women into STEM and then once they get there they don't feel like they belong, so they leave, here's 6 ideas that you can start to work on that will help us create a sense of belonging. Next, assign male accountability. This is probably your #1 lever of success in retaining and promoting women in your field, is educating men on what women they need to know about women and vice versa. Require your male deans, chairs, and administrators to work on 1 retention issue a year. Require it, mandate it. Reward males that promote and support female research efforts. Publish more literature for men and how they address the female inequities in STEM. There's a lot of literature out here in, what can a woman do to fit in? What can a woman do? What do we have to do for women? There's very little literature out there about what do men need to do? How do they show up? What are their concerns? How do we make this, connection? And then lastly, create the Me-We national organization that I've always wanted to create and I haven't. So please create it, invite me to be a member of it. And the Me-We is Men Engaged in Women Equality. Men Engaged in Women's Equality. Create that organization that allows both genders to be at the table. Assigning male accountability, I think one of the best examples I have is in this short video on, I'm going to let it load and pause, about what women want at work and how we can, maybe look at that through a male gender lens. So let me get this video loaded, and we'll start.
Women up the food chain in a company, and we find that a lot of times women are more reluctant to raise their hands for these promotions, for these big positions. Right. Why is that? How do you fix something like that? That's right. So there's all this research that tells us that women won't raise their hand for promotions. And I actually spoke to an executive, a top executive, who said to me, if I have a job open and there's 5 criteria, and a woman fits 4 of them, she will sit on her hand. She won't raise her hand. If there's a man out there with 1, he'll be like raising his hand and saying, pick me, pick me. And so what he does, for example, is he goes out, and when there's a job opening, he will go and find women who should be in the pool. Not that they're necessarily going to get the job, but these are women who should apply. He's telling them, you've got to raise your hand. Now, the other tip that I thought was really funny that you had for male bosses was don't be afraid of tears, which really strikes me because I think that there's this sense with guys, they're really uncomfortable, they're afraid they're going to make you cry, and they're not sure what they're going to do if they start that scenario. This is the biggest surprise to me, I have to tell you, because I'm not a crier in the office. I'll cry at commercials, but not in the office. And one of the biggest surprises was that all of this research now tells us that men are definitely afraid of tears, and as a result, they're not giving honest feedback to the women who report to them. And that's a real detriment to the women because they can't improve, they can't grow if they don't get the appropriate feedback. So if you're a woman, do you think there should be a ban on you crying in the office? I mean, what's the right way on the other side of the table to handle that? I think this is really, we were focused on sort of what can men do about it. Like, don't be afraid. One of the things is that men sort of misinterpret very often tears as upset, crying, sadness. Mostly when women are crying in the office, it's generally frustration or anger. And so there's just sort of a miscommunication there. And it's really important not to go with the miscommunication and to understand that that the woman needs feedback. Yeah. All right, well, it's a really interesting piece. Lots more tips for male bosses at WSJ.com. Joanne, thanks.
So I pulled that up on assign male accountability because what the shift is that we have I don't know how to say this gracefully, so I'm just going to say it honestly and authentically. Women can't solve this problem alone of retention and promotion of females in STEM. Males need to be on board and equally passionate and equally engaged in it, if you will. Another root cause is that, I almost didn't engage in this topic, as I mentioned last time, because it's a lot of talk. It's a lot of talk. We talk about, excuses. Women leave because they want to raise their children. We talk about, well, why should a man have to change to accommodate a woman? We talk about, well, if women want to get in there, let's just get in there. You got to push, 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 push. But it's all talk, and we don't actually replace that talk with action. And action meaning, sit down and be bold. Play big or go home, if you will. I teach a lean methods class, and one of the things I'm going to experiment with in retention and promotion in my department for next year, so I can have, to see if it works and doesn't work, and also experiment with 2 other universities in my area, is I'm going to start to create some visual management systems. I'm going to go back to some of our lean practices in making change in the manufacturing processes, and I'm going to apply them to how we make change in this gender inequity in STEM. So I'm going to start to create some visual management systems that will help us with our retention and promotion processes that are gender friendly. That's going to help us make sure that we have a female friendly work environment. I don't know what they're going to look like, but I will be willing to share in a year, if you are interested, what kind of stop signs and roadblocks we ran into and what kind of successes we have. Another way I'm going to replace talk with action, and I recommend you do, is red tag old behaviors. I mean, if you think about the 5S model, and some of you are not as steeped in lean as I am, but if you think about the 5S model, you start with sorting, and then you set in order, and et cetera, et cetera. In the sort process, you have to have the ability to repeatably and expeditiously and efficiently recreate, red tag old equipment and get it out of the manufacturing facility, because it is stalling progress. It's taking up space. It's creating confusion. What if we could take and red tag old behaviors in our female-friendly work environment, or in our retention and promotional practices, and apply that same principle? And then implement gender-balanced meeting management practices. As you saw in that Carly Fioroni, sorry, I just slaughtered her name. As you saw in that video, what if we treated men like we treat women at work? What if you just gender balanced your meeting practices, where you did things more collaboratively, and you called on people, and you made sure that there was everybody had a voice, not just the loudest voice. That's something easy you can do that will make a huge difference. And then mandate a 50-50 equal split on tenure and promotion committees. I ask us to be careful about this one, because I've been in an environment where there's been 2 women and 2 men. So in number, we're a 50-50 split. But in title, in political capital, in, I don't want to say clout, hierarchy, the males won because the women hadn't been elevated. So it has to be an equal split in decision making, an equal split in voice, an equal split in, et cetera, et cetera. Otherwise, we're going to go back to this scenario, and this scenario being something that some of you will recognize.
What? Now let me finish, okay? And don't go flying off the handle.
You gave that promotion to Bob Enright instead of me. I've got 5 years seniority over him.
I know that.
For Christ's sake, I trained him.
I know that, but see, the company...
Oh, the company bullshit. It's your decision. You promoted him. You tell me why.
Well, in the first place, see, Bob does have a college degree.
Oh, brilliant. Brilliant. While he's away at college getting his precious, useless degree, I'm working my butt off at this company.
And in the second place, he does have a family to support.
And I don't? What has that got to do with anything?
Violet, look, my hands are tied here. The company needs a man in this position. Clients would rather deal with men when it comes to figures.
Oh, now we're getting it. I lose a promotion because of some idiot prejudice. The boys in the club are threatened, and you're so intimidated by any woman that won't sit at the back of a bus.
Spare me the women's lip crap, okay? Now, I know how you feel, and I understand it.
You understand zilch.
I understand I'm still a boss here. And even though you might be pretty valuable out there, you better get hold of yourself. I'm not going to sit here and take this. God damn it. Dorothy, get in here!
So now, granted that movie 9 to 5 is an example of, some early movement for females in the workplace. On the other hand, I challenge us to think about one thing as we watch that old video clip. At that point in time, we were very verbal and out loud about what the issues were. His comment about, I promoted this man and, this woman, and they were talking about it out loud in probably what we would perceive as very inappropriate ways by today's workplace standards. On the other hand, have we just quit talking about it, but we still think it, and thinking it still controls our actions? Because I don't believe that we have just completely erased some of that thinking. And so what about we replace talk with action and actually, in a very respectful way, talk about those feelings, those thinkings, those issues. My children have been raised in an environment where they're colorblind. They're colorblind because the race of a student and the exposure they've had to different, ethnic groups and diversity and in their upbringing has literally made them colorblind, if you will. If you fast forward to some of my generation of aunts and uncles, they have to really consciously be colorblind because they have some of those old paradigms ingrained. That same issue of being colorblind, we should be gender blind, but we're not. And there was this huge study, and I almost posted it, that talked about, blind reviewing gender in resumes and replacing some of the women's resumes with he and some of the men's resumes with she, so there was just really gender blindness in resume reviews. And when there was gender blindness in those resumes, there was not an inequity in promotions. And so they compared that group with the group that had gender attached to each resume when females were up for promotion, and there was gender color. Men were promoted more often than women in that situation. Fascinating research. So what about if we replace talk with action? Another way to replace talk with action is be bold. Publish your salaries for men and women. Put them up in a big sign in the lunchroom. And now I know some of you are cringing. I grew up in the era of HR as an HR manager where you don't talk about your pay. Well, how fooled we are, because people talk about pay all the time. And working for a government, this information is readily available anyway. How about you publish them so it is visual that there is no inequity in salaries? If 60% of the exit differential is because of promotions and salary, fix that one thing, and you will probably impact your retention and promotions. Publish promotion and tenure decisions for men and women. Get one of those big Ivy Tech signs or MSUM signs that say, we promoted 4 men and we promoted 4 women, or we promoted 6 men and we promoted 7 women. However that might work out. But replace talk with action and put this in a very out loud environment. Now, I apologize if I offended anybody with that, because I know we all have different beliefs and ideas on things that we should and shouldn't do in this area. However, I do believe it is a time to replace talk with action. Next, create a female retention plan, a female retention and promotion plan. And what I'm showing you here is a form that is a process that I was exposed to when I went to the IWIT seminar. And you can feel free to use this template. Joyce Wilkerson has this template. Maybe you're already using this template. But it's just a process in working you through being thoughtful, planful, and strategic about your female retention and promotion issues. They have 5 categories about, ensure you're teaching to female learning styles. Ensure your female students are successful in the lab. These are some important things that were put in, that could maybe be low-hanging fruit for us. If you feel you have other priorities, like you want to put as number 3, publicize salaries, and here's the action steps that we can do. This is a very methodical format for you to do. It's a very short 4-page document that, you know, holding some focus groups and filling out, and then holding people accountable for the action items might give you some leverage. Have a zero tolerance policy of perceived or unperceived gender inequity or behaviors. You know, lots of grade schools and high schools have went to a zero tolerance for bullying, zero tolerance for guns, zero tolerance for, you know, X, Y, and Z. What if you put in a zero tolerance policy for inequity? Just, you're not going to tolerate it, and, you know, somewhat eliminate the do-over. Now, I know that's bold, and I know that's risky, but I believe that the ones that take the boldest risks are going to move the dial the quickest and the fastest with some of these promotion and retention issues in STEM. Before we open it up for questions, I want us to just pause and think about what Jonathan Edson, a PhD in biology, said. And he has been very involved in making sure that at conferences there's gender equity, because he went to a conference out east. I'm not going to, you know, name the conference. I'm not going to do that. I don't think that's fair. But there were 25 male executives or 25 male speakers that walked across the stage over the course of a 3-day conference, and there was only one female. So he took it on as a personal initiative to make sure that females were represented as well. Yes, he had to look harder. Yes, he had to fight harder, because there aren't as many of them. But he is making great progress in that, because he can't understand that if we want science to be the best and cutting edge, doing new and interesting things, then why have we potentially abandoned half the population? Why wouldn't we look at incorporating women in STEM and retaining and promoting them as this great science experiment in how we can move forward and be cutting edge and interesting and innovative? You know, that's somewhat perplexing to me, because science is built on innovation. Science is built on research. Science is built on, you know, development and doing things differently. So is technology, so is engineering. Why can't we use what we're bred to do in our hard field and do it and take those same principles and attach them to elevating the retention and promotion, you know, situation with females in STEM? I went to a speaker last year, and her name was Lynette Lewis, and she's written a book called Climbing the Corporate Ladder in Stiletto Heels. She actually was our keynote speaker at Women's Connect, where I'm the president of. And she left all of the women in that group with a 1 + 1 + 1. And I've seen great traction when we think about that. She asked each of us to think about moving forward on this dial with what one thing can you do in 1 week, and what one person can help you with that, and then report back on that. You know, I would really be excited to hear from Joycey when I see her at ATMAE in November. Lots of little changes that Ivy Tech has incorporated because of some of the things they've maybe, you know, bumped into by themselves, or some of the things maybe we inspired them to think about, some of the things that this entire grant process that you all have been working on has caused. You know, one thing, 1 week, one person. You know, you can drastically make a difference if you have the, you know, the desire and the ability, and if you'll carve out some time for that. I am excited. We've had a chance to talk about recruiting and retaining women, and we've had a chance to talk about promoting and retaining women, and I'm excited that, you know, I'm excited that a college of your magnitude and the college of your reach is interested in this topic, because if an institution like Ivy Tech changes this, you will indeed change the landscape for women in STEM, because you're big and you're bold. So with that being said, I would like to close down some of the things I have open, and then go to Leslie and open it up for, or Lindsay, excuse me, and open it up for any questions you might have.
Okay, I only have one question at this time. Had a user want to see if you could expand a little bit on the definition of visual management systems?
Yes, I would love to. And can you tell me who the person is so I somewhat know what their background is?
Absolutely. Let me pull up the question here. Oh, it disappeared. Sorry, but I believe this was from Sarah Cody. And
And do you have?
Sarah is a STEM faculty member in Bloomington. I can't speak to exactly where her specialty is.
That's okay. I'll just dig in. Well, Sarah, thank you for that question. A visual management system, in theory, was a part of, lean manufacturing processes. And a visual management system is all a part of creating stability in your manufacturing environment. And a visual management system is something that you create a big poster of that is a process that allows your employees to look up and see where something may or may not be going right, or to look up and be reminded of a safety issue. It's different than just a visual. A visual is just a poster. You would see a poster of, women in STEM. That's a visual. A visual management system is where you have outlined a process and then you've put that process at key locations in your work environment. So what I'm envisioning working on, and I'm sorry I don't have all the details, maybe Sarah, if you're interested, you can email me and we could work on this together, but I'm envisioning in our conference room where we make all of our promotional decisions and our tenure decisions, that we have outlined our promotion and tenure process in this big visual management banner that will remind us of the things that we do before and after the meeting, and we'll even have cues and metrics underneath it in how many women we promote and how many men we promote. And we're a real small department, so the measurements of it are going to be a little bit bleak to start with, but if you look at our history, I would be able to proudly say in this visual management system that I went to being a 90% male-dominated department. I was the 10%, to now we are a 50-50 split, male to female. And I would like to outline what we've done visually in this management system to make sure that we can repeat that in the future. I have as many women that are tenured and promoted in this department as I have men, and I have actually a higher retention issue of males right now than I do females. I'm somewhat making an excuse that that's because they were at the age of retirement, but it's definitely something that I want to keep my pulse on. So thank you, Sarah, for that question. I hope that somewhat clarifies what I was thinking about. Anybody else have a question?
Not at this time, but Sarah says thank you, and then that really did help clarify. And she's in biotech. I don't know what I was thinking. So,
Okay.
All right. Any last questions? Feel free to type them into chat, and if not, that'll be. We can definitely continue the dialogue with Pam as well through email. I'll send out a post-event evaluation and some other items, and this recording will be available. And I know Pam would be happy to schedule some time to talk one-on-one about any of these strategies. So don't hesitate to reach out to myself, to Pam, or to Joyce Wilkerson, the principal investigator on this NSF grant, and we'd be happy to continue the dialogue after the event. So Pam, any last items you'd like to cover? I think you covered it pretty well. So.
My last thought is be bold, because it's going to take some bold action. And I just really believe wholeheartedly that if Ivy Tech is bold, you're not only going to change the landscape of women in STEM at Ivy Tech, you're going to change the landscape across the nation, because you're big. So be big and be bold, and good luck with your efforts.
Awesome. Wonderful words to end on. Thanks to everybody for participating, and look for the event recording, and please share all of this information with your colleagues, and as well as complete your post-event evaluation. So thanks to Pam so much for your time and your wonderful information. Take care.
All right, thanks.
Sam.